Parashat Naso contain a lot of subject. I would like to start soft and then we go to other subjects in the Parsha. Soft, I mean the end of chapter 6, the priestly blessing, Birchat HaKohanim. In Eretz Israel we have a daily blessing. This is at the end of chapter 6. So in the land of Israel we have in the daily basis Kohanim that come up and bless. In the diaspora you see blessings usually in the holidays, high holidays. If you pay attention at the priestly benediction, priestly blessing, here is on the page 341. The blessing, it's 22 to 27, the very end of chapter 6. So in the text, God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, so shall you bless the children of Israel," and the 3 sections of blessings. When the priests, the Kohanim, come up and bless us, they begin with the statement, "Blessed are you, God, Master of the universe, God of God and God of our ancestors, who sanctify us in the sanctification of the ancient high priest Aaron, and commanded us to bless the people of Israel with love." So it's a statement, it's a blessing that the rabbis instituted. But right away the question pops up, so what exactly, where is exactly it's written a commandment to bless people with love? How exactly this has to do with the statement they made? Because the statement is from the Torah. What exactly the statement they made? There's 3 different statements. 1, may Hashem, may God bless you and safeguard you. 2, may God illuminate His countenance for you and be gracious to you. And 3, may God lift His countenance to you and establish peace for you. So who is exactly the one who's making the blessings? When yesterday it was the second day of the festival of Shavuot here in diaspora, and we have many Kohanim, many priests that came up on the bima, on the stage, and they bless us. So we cover our face with the shawl, with the talit, and they make those blessings, and they chanted, and everyone they chanted, but they recite a word of the Torah. The blessing they make before that recitation, right? It's "Blessed are you, God, who commanded us to bless the people with love." So it means that the Kohen should love the people. It means that God expresses love to people. It means that the statements apply to love. What exactly they meant when they make these blessings? They're basically reciting the text of the Torah. The simple answer is that it's not the Kohen who bless, it's God bless. How do you know that God is the one who blessed and not the Kohen? Because if you examine the text, let's read together the text. So the text starts with the statement, "Yevarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha." May God bless you and safeguard you. Which means the Kohen said, may who? May God bless you and safeguard you. Which means it's not the Kohen in that sense who makes the blessings, it's God who makes the blessings. Furthermore, it means that the Kohen is a vessel who transmitted the blessing from God to people. So the Kohanim ask God to transmit to them, the people, the blessing. So with that in mind, we start understanding this introduction, which is the blessing the Kohanim made before they begin their blessing. And they said, God who sanctify us in His commandment and commanded us to bless people with love. Now think about it. In Israel, they do that every single day. In a diaspora, it's only in special occasions like holidays, high holidays. What happened to us at that time? The Kohanim cover the faces, cover the hands, and we cover our faces. And how we cover our faces? We wrap up our faces with the talit, which have the tzitzit, and the tzitzit has all these nuts and strings that all together contain 613, which is an application to 613 commandment, and they are basically wrap up with the whole mitzvot and the blessings. Now, if you would like to join with me a little deeper, it's the Talmud in Tractate Sotah, page 39, that go to the next stage with that. The Talmud have a famous question. They said, we don't find in any place that God commanded us in such a commandment to bless the people with love. Which means if the Kohen come up and he didn't like someone, so the blessing it's meaningless. So there is a one of the commentators there on the Talmud, Tractate Sotah 38, its name is Parsha. He explained that when you make, for example, Havdalah, so or Kiddush, so you filled up the cup, and you fill it up in such a way that sometimes the grape juice or the wine is overflow the cup. And usually it's a sign of blessings, because there is a phrase that said that someone who has a good eye and has an abundance is expression of gratitude and blessings. So the idea is that someone, the rabbi tells us, someone who's giving the blessing has to have the spiritual, the spirit, the vision, the feeling of giving a blessing, regardless to his personal feeling towards some people, etc. Some go further to say that it's conditional, which means that a Kohen should not go up and submit a blessing to people if he has a hatred to some people, because then he is not a proper vessel who's supposed to transmit the blessing to people properly.
Or he haven't purified himself before he go up to do that too.
Yeah, or, right, he can meditate, etc. But the key point is, they call it Tov Ayin Hu Yevarech. Someone who has a good eye, he's properly make the blessing. Because when you say that you should bless people with love, it's a very emotional, it's a sentimental issue. It's more than just a good eye. It's the idea that, in a way, God said, make it with full heart, with good intention, with a sincere intention that you are just a vessel, not for yourself. You're a vessel that you want people to bless. Now, again, since we have a little more time, I would like to go deeper with that. Human nature, usually, human nature go as follows. When you ask someone, how's your business? So either that person said, it's okay, it's good. And it means when a person said it's good, it means either that he's successful and his competition is falling apart for some people. Another option, if you hear a person said, you ask him or her how's business, and they said fair. Fair, the way that human nature is that, okay, we all have some problems, meaning my competition, myself, everyone. If you hear a person said the business is very bad, human nature, it means that the competition is very successful, and that's a real problem for me. That's human nature. If you go deeper, those of us who study psychology, I have the privilege to study a couple of years psychology at the college. So they teach you that human nature, most of the statistics show, especially the famous one from Carl Jung, human nature is in a way that average person don't mind to see someone else successful as long as it's not on my account. Meaning, average person has an attitude that if someone else is good and successful, why should I bother? But if it's taking something from my business or my pie, then it's an issue. That's human nature. Now we'll go to the Kohen and you see how it's applicable. Kohanim, when they divided the land, let's talk history first for those who are not so familiar. Originally, when Israel, Jacob, our forefather, had the 12 sons, Reuben was the first son. Then it was the whole incidents with the golden calf, and the tribe of Levi came when Moses said, "Who is for God, come to me," and the tribe of Levi took over. And it was very sad, they killed many people, those who continue rebel against Moses and Aaron at the golden calf. From that time onward, it was a big change in the Jewish people. From that point, the tribe of Levi took over. Because of their loyalty to the leadership, they took over the whole services and priesthood, etc. Now, before they entered the land, it was a very clear plan how to divide the land. The lottery that took place was more specific to a family, but in a very general term, they said by the eye of the Lord, which means the land, even it was occupied with those temporarily nations, it was pre-planned that this tribe is going to do so and so and going to occupy a certain area, and another tribe going to occupy another area. It goes so to the extreme that some tribe not allowed to marry. I mean, it was rules not to marry each other until everything's settled. The only tribe that didn't partake with that, again, it was 2.5 tribes in the eastern part, another 8.5 tribe in the western part of the soon-to-be the land of Israel, was the tribe of Levi. The reason for that is because they are the servant of the Lord, and they are the people who are in charge for the priesthood and everything at the temple, upcoming temple in Jerusalem. So the plan was that everyone in the other tribes are basically collecting the first fruits, they're collecting whatever come out of their agriculture, and bring it to the priest at the temple, and they basically transmit it. Whatever they give, they transmit to God and portion for them, and that's the way they maintain their lives. So in that sense, everyone depend upon the priest because they are the people who are taking the services in the temple. By the same token, the priests depend on people's donations. So it was a concept that it's called matnot kehuna, which means the priest gets a portion from everyone. Another person committed a sin, he's bringing a sin offering, all kind of different sin offering. So upon confessing and bringing that offering, part of that sometimes go to the priest, part of that depend on the offering. Some of them go to God, some partially to burn, some of them to people in that time, sometimes go back to the owner, but in general, the priest depend upon the donation of people in order to survive. It wasn't a property or business that they maintained themselves at that time. So, how it works? The Kohen is giving people the blessings, and because he's giving people blessing, what happened? The business prospers. So, in our simple language, it looks like he has an interest to give them a big blessing, because their business will prosper, and then he gets more. But the truth of the matter is that the Kohen has several jobs. One of them is the idea that he is giving these blessings And he has in his mind, the richer they are, the more donations he gets. And that's a dangerous path. So one of the reasons we say that he must give the blessing with love, it's because of that sensitive issue. That the Kohen should not feel that he is really has his own agenda or his own ego involved with this. Why? Because he is just a vessel who transmitted blessing from God to people. Clear? Now, the Magen Avraham is a very famous rabbi that comment on the code. In chapter 128, he quoted the Zohar, the Holy Zohar, and he said, and I quote, Kol Kohen, it's an Aramaic, de la rachim le'ama, o lo rachamim le lo yisa et kapav, which means any Kohen that does not have a compassionate feeling toward people, meaning you don't need to deeply love everyone, but as long as you have feeling to people, feeling meaning that you are a vessel that transmitted blessing to people, and you have to have feeling of wanting to be the vessel. It's like in a simple our language, like a nurse that bringing the medicine to the patients. There's a different attitude how he or she serve the patients. It's a huge difference if they throw it away or give a mean statement versus they give it with love. So in that sense, the Kohen, they said that the Zohar said if he doesn't do it properly, it's better if he should not come up and do his job. Because if you don't do it with love, don't bother. That some go to the extreme. It's like the famous Hasidic Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev said, by saying, you should say to them, God said, tell Moses, tell Aaron, they should say them, and more lahem, meaning that they should understand, the priest should understand that this is a condition. They need to have the expression of love when they do that. Otherwise it's, and here we learn an important concept, which is that in order to have the proper blessings and proper acceptance on blessings, it has to come from the point in our heart that express love. There are for sure rabbis that go to the numerical value. If you take the Hebrew letters of the Ahava with love, it's a Bet it's 2 and Aleph is 1, etc. Hey it's 5. So you go together to number 15. And if you count the words on the blessing of the priest, there are 15 words. So it's the whole idea is that they need to express their blessing out of love. If it's not blessing that comes from love of people, if the priest the Kohen has some very bad feeling toward people, it's a serious issue for him to come up and perform his blessings. There's another school of thought that hold that the Kohen is a teacher. Part of the Kohanim's job is to teach people. And to teach people, you have to have the love toward people. Because if a teacher, we all suffer, I believe, from teachers who don't like the students or don't like to teach. A teacher must love his student, otherwise it will not come across properly. The successful student, the successful future builder of the world always come out of good teachers that really teach out of love, caring. So that's another school of thought, why the Kohen needs to express love. Another idea the rabbis delve a lot is the idea that the Kohen carries his own sentiments, he's human, he has his own feelings. But it's not so much what he feels, it's the scripture that tell him what to say, what he needs to say, and the emotion involved with people who are listening to what he said. And what he's basically said is a 3 different statements. Statement number 1 is, may God illuminate, may God bless you and safeguard you. That's the first statement. Which means there is a blessing, but it's a safeguard, it's a separate blessing. The safeguard meaning, I mentioned that many times, there are people who prosper, yet they come back and constantly said, Rabbi, I made a lot of money, but I have a hole in my pocket. The money goes to lawyers and doctors and dentists. So one thing is ask for blessing, another thing is to safeguard the blessings. It's a separate things. So by expressing these specific statements that come from the Torah, it's not what the Kohen said, because he doesn't have a choice. He needs to recite what the Torah tells him to say. So it's either not what he said, but how he said it, or the idea that people listening to the content, to the content of his message, of his words that come from the Torah, and he made a very clear blessing. What did he say? He said in the second one, may God lift up his countenance to you and establish peace for you. That's the third one. What does that mean? You want good health, he give you a blessing. You see, number one, God bless you. And you want to wealth, give you a blessing. You want protection of your wealth, safeguard you, right? Eliminate his countenance for you and be gracious to you, which means all these problems and sins and issues, all of that should be erased, and God illuminate his countenance. And then the most important thing is, may God lift his countenance and establish peace for you. What does that mean, establish peace for you? So how good if you have a business and you have people that hates you, you step on toes on people, you step on bodies on people in order to achieve what you are. So one of the key point is that it's a unity between people, that people love each other and care for each other, meaning it's not only to say, I don't mind if someone else is successful in business as long as it's not in my account. It's the idea that the person should really be content and happy if someone else is blessing, and it's come from the point of departure. The Talmud said in the tractate Beitzah 15 or 16, they said there that all the yearly budget come from God. When we said in the high holidays we pray for our income, it's a yearly budget. If person believe that the manna come from heaven, which means God is the one who provides the livelihood, and he have the trust in God, then all the perception of life change. So he's not seeing success of someone else as a threat. He's not seeing someone else grow as something that affected him. You should see that the success of other people is it's for the best, and everyone has the yearly budget and their portions. And as we said earlier, a person can get a lot, and all of that end up with deficit at the end of the month. So it's not so much what you get, is how you keep that properly. And the key to make it properly is the end, which is unity between people, the heart unity, so one will not feel that it's an account of someone else. So it's not so much the Kohen, it's the word, the content of his saying. And that's the idea of making this blessing. Now we go a little bit Kabbalah, because there are some people who always like Kabbalah. Yes, Gil?
I got a question.
Yes, please.
Rabbi, when you praying in the morning, you get up and you say your prayer, can you say this blessing, the priestly blessing, to yourself, although you're not a Kohanim, but still
excellent
repeat
point.
it?
So Gil asked a question. When we have in the morning prayer, a part of the recitation is the blessing of the priests. Well, we need to say a word of Torah, and that's part of saying word of Torah, but the whole concept is receiving God blessings. We're expressing in a way our godly part. We in our language, we are like partners with God in creation. And because we are partners with God in creation, it's the concept that Rabbi Soloveitchik speaks a lot, the duality, which is the ability to have the godly part, the divine part within ourselves, expressed sometimes first foremost to ourselves, and then we'll be able to bestow that blessing to others. Let me share with you an example from the book called Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch is one of the important core books written at the Middle Ages, 11th century, and it said as follows: Chafetz Chaim Yitbarach B'tuvo HaGadol, God in His compassion and mercy, Levarech et Amo al Yedei HaMeshartim, to bless His people toward the servants, the Kohanim. HaKohanim Tamid Bebet Hashem, because these are the people who always in the house of the Lord, the Kohanim. V'kol machshavtam davka b'avodatam, because they're not busy with business, with other issues, they are focusing on the service of the Lord all day long. V'nafsham kshura b'irato, they're always in fear, because they are out there, and in a sense the eye of the Lord is over them all the times. Ubizchutam, because of their privileges, because of their merit, tachul habracha alehem v'yitbarechu kol ma'asehem. So because of that, is a blessing in their hands, and the deeds become a blessings, which means it's like someone who's such a righteous person that you believe that he is a vessel that be able to transmit the blessing. So when you're saying it in the morning, for example, you are basically a person that devoted yourself to come and pray and dedicate that time to pray to God, etc. So in a sense, God expressing the blessing toward you. So it is something that you yearn to receive, or it's really God expression of blessing toward prayer. Now we'll go a little deeper, we'll go a little bit Kabbalah. So if you go to the text itself, you see that it's divided by the three parts. He said that the Kohen is basically opening a channel between people and God. In a sense, he's the one who helps people to erase, to eradicate, to expunge their sins and open a channel for a new future. So it's like Moses did when he went to God and said, forgive the people for the sins. But how he exactly does that? So one of the reasons we cover our faces and we don't see them, it's because they're using their finger in a certain way and they're holding it in a certain way. Why they do that? So it's a text, we just give you the vignette. Is a text in the Song of Songs that said that my beloved dodi metzitz min ha'charakim, which means God is watching from this little hole within the fingers. So in that sense, it's expression of the 10 sephirot, the 10 different dimensions, in that sense, attributes to God, and God in between is there. In other words, even the time of darkness, there is God that come out and give the blessing. So it's like God saying, I'm there even at the time of crisis. So God institutes toward the Kohanim, He is reminded to people that He is there. We see it much clearer in our days since we have freedom and we have State of Israel and more. But if you take the Jewish history at large, and you see most of the time in Jewish history, the Jewish people are in exile and many times suffer a tremendous persecution, this is a word of encouragement that comes from this. So because they are in the Zoharic language is like a ray of light of God, and a person cannot take the ray of light of God, so in that sense God contracted Himself to this sprinkle of sanctity that come out of the hole between the hand of the priest, the Kohanim. Again, I'm not going too much with this, I just give you the abbreviation. Now we go to the next subject, which is the subject of Sotah. This is a serious subject, I expecting excitement, so let's go to the Sotah and see what's involved. The Sotah, we're going back to 337, chapter 5, beginning of sentence 11. God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, any man whose wife shall go astray and commit treachery against him." So it's a long story how you treat a Sotah. Sotah, in that sense, it's a family situation. The husband is suspecting his wife of being unfaithful. The question that pops up, especially in the modern days, first question I hear all the times, what happens if it's the opposite way? If the husband is not faithful? I heard that. Another question, is that fair to say that he's just suspecting and he doesn't have any evidence, etc.? Because if you look at the text, they said that he said it. How do you know it? Because they said "Vehilo nitpasa," that no one have a clear evidence that that's happened. It wasn't that the two witnesses came out and said that he did it, she did it. It's just he warned her, and it's not clear. For example, someone I know, his wife was dating, his wife was basically have a boyfriend for a long time, and before they got married, and according to what he said, nothing, or she said, whatever, nothing happened between them, and then they broke up and she married that fellow. And that fellow, I think you will feel for that, especially the other guy, right? That fellow said to her a few times, "I don't want you to have contact with this guy," from whatever, before we got married. And whatever it is, they're married, they have children and everything, and it turns that while he went to China for a business deal, his parents get a phone call from a neighbor who claimed that that neighbor was the best friend of that guy. Let's give a name. Give me a name.
Joe.
Joe. Excellent. So this guy Joe was he married to a girl. Give her a name.
Mary.
Mary. So Joe had Mary, and Mary was dating before she married to Joe to another fellow. His name is
Bob.
Bob. Now Joe is in China. And while Joe in China, his parents get a phone call that they saw Mary coming out of a car at night, middle of the night, from Bob's car. And who said it and who called the parents? The neighbor that lived in the apartment downstairs, the same building that they live. Okay? So to make long story short, they catch Joe, whatever it is, in Beijing, whatever is there, and they told him what's happening. So Joe called Mary, and he gets very jealous and angry, or whatever it is, and she denies it. She said, "It's not true, I never went with Bob, I have nothing to do, I don't speak with him, I don't know any business with him." Sounds familiar? All right? Nothing. Fine. But then, then it turns that it was much more than that. It's coming from different sources, that is something going on, etc., etc., etc. So Joe called another friend, and that friend, give me a name. Louis. And that Louis is a private detective. So Louis put on the phone a special, how do you call this? Tabs, thank you, to catch if there's any truth, while, again, Joel is in China. So it's not clear, the whole thing, it's a big mishmash, but it turns that she has some phone conversation with him because Louis recorded it. So Joe called the rabbi. And it was a big turmoil. There were children in between, it was a big mess. She claimed, this is funny, because the first stage she claimed that nothing happened, she didn't talk to Bob, she didn't have anything to do with Bob, it's nothing. And then when she was pressed hard, told her family, meaning the rabbi and her mother, and the mother called her, and it was a big to-do in the family, she admitted that she had phone conversation with the other Bob. Then when it's pressed a little harder, then she admitted that it was illicit phone conversation, to say the least. Okay? Then, when the evidence come out, it turns that she met Bob by coincidence, according to her view, at the wedding of another family friends, and then he offered to take her home because it was very late at night, and she didn't sit next to him, she sat on the back of the car, and there's nothing happened between them. That's the problem. And now listen carefully, and now you see how it's connected to the Torah portion. Here is the problem. When things like that happen at the biblical time, at the Torah's time, God put a formula to solve all of that without spending so much money on lawyers. It was very simple. Why? The Torah described here that they take a jar of water, right? And with their consent, they have a priest taking on a parchment, that the Torah is written on that parchment, and write the sacred name of God, which is the Holy of Holies. And he put that name of God in the water, and the name of God erased on the water. And the priest called her up and said to her, look, if you are free of guilt, you drink it, nothing happened to you. But if you're not, you're going to die. That's it. Now, go further to say what the Talmud described, and again, remember, that's ancient. The Talmud described that in our language, again, anthropomorphic human language, is God said, Ra'ui hu shmi shenichtav b'kedusha shimache al hamayim. It is worth it to have my sacred name that's written by a priest in a sacred way to be erased, which is against the core of Torah, against the Ten Commandments, against everything. But in our language, God said, I don't mind to do it in order to restore peace between husband and wife. Which is a very deep, emotional discussion among the rabbis, how important and how deeply we stress the value of peace and unity in a house. That in our language, God or the rabbis or we should go out of our way to restore peace. If you here yesterday, just before Yisco, I mentioned that sometimes you need to sacrifice even workout hour or dinner with the family just to restore peace between husband and wife. That's crucial to for our survival. So again, it's the two opposite. In one hand, we're not allowed to erase or even say the name of God in vain. On the other hand, God here gave instructions to do it, to take a parchment, to write his name, to erase his name with the water, etc. like drinks. The rabbis go further to say, and they said that if the husband was not faithful, even she wasn't faithful, nothing will happen. Which means the rabbis emphasize that all these biblical formula at the temple's time, if the husband also messed up in different ways, right? So therefore all this formula with water, even she has some guilt, will not work. It has to be in such a formula that he was very loyal and she was not. Furthermore, the rabbis annulled this. There is a statement in Talmud, let me read it, put it here. They said here, in the Talmud tractate Sotah in Yerushalmi, they said, Misherabu hamenaafim batlu hamayim hameorarim. When they realized that there are many men who are guilty of being disloyal, and the only thing they do is they're blaming the wives for being disloyal, therefore the rabbis annul this concept of using the water rituals of Sotah to clarify, because the whole this ritual was one purpose, mainly one purpose, to clean these bad feelings and create harmony in a family. Because remember, it is not a situation that you have two witnesses that were there witnessing an action. Excuse me. She denies it, partially, fully. So what do we derive from all of this? From reading it in the Torah and learning all of that. So the Gemara tells us in the Tractate Gittin, page 6, the Gemara said, first rule is, Al yatil adam eima yetera bebeito. A person not supposed to create fear in his house. In our language we can say it in both ways. Like famous Jackie Mason of a Jewish husband. It can go either way. You know, if you're not so familiar, so he used the term that a Jewish husband can be executive that make $500,000 a year, yet when he walks in his house he's scared, you know, something will happen. And when you go to the shopping center, he's always, is that okay? Can I buy it? Not buy it? What do you think? It's okay? Not okay? Right? And he depends on her opinion. So basically, it's the idea that it's when it's a fear in a house, it's bad. The Talmud said a person should not create an atmosphere of fear. A person should create an atmosphere of love in his house, and sometimes you need to give up some of your ego. Sometimes you need to apologize. Sometimes you need to say, I'm sorry, even you don't feel that you're really guilty of something, just to create an atmosphere. Furthermore, the rabbis go in the strongest language, and they said, and again I'm quoting here the Talmud in the Sotah, and in a few other places, that a person not allowed to lock the door on his partner. In other words, you see it unfortunately in other third world culture or Middle Eastern culture still a lot, that for example over there you see countries like Sudan, for example, or Iran, that the husband leave the house and he lock up the door and take a key with him, and she basically in jail at the house until he will come back. You look at me like I'm making up stories. Just open the newspaper and read. So by our language, by our religion, that's forbidden. A person not allowed to do that to his partner. So indirectly what the Torah wants to imply to us, when in is a lack of faith between the partners and is lack of communication between the partners, it ends up with this type of situation. So it goes like this. Even everything was clean. She drank the water, nothing happened. Now he is at peace. You know, they continue their marriage, okay? They still, the Torah require here, if you see in sentence 15, to bring an offering. Anybody has an idea why he needs to bring an offering? Or they need to bring an offering?
It's atonement for...
Atonement for what?
For the... You say like a symbol, because they bring a false... It was false what they say about it.
Okay, so there are 2 points. One point they said that they create an atmosphere, create a situation that they ends up with the public disgrace, because even she's clean or he's clean or they are fine now, but the whole turmoil publicly with the priest and going to Jerusalem and have this formula and have her drink it and all of that, it creates a situation that is they are both responsible for situation like that, and therefore there is need offering. But if you go even deeper, is the whole idea that, again it's in our language, that God is mad. You look what happened to you. You took my holy of holy names and you take that name and erase it in the water in order to restore peace between you people. So they need now to bring an offering for taking the name of God and erase it.
That's considered like desecrating God's name or something?
It's not considered desecration, because originally God said that they should do that. But since they did it, and they reach a point of doing such a thing, they need to bring an offering for that. And another interesting offering is that they bring in like the loaf, they call it here Asirita Efa Kemach Seorim. They're bringing this loaf of bread, which is again they like the two breads we have on Shabbat, the two bread of manna. It's an expression of the two. So that's again is expression of offering applied to certain ritual. It's not so much animals offering. It's the loaf or the bread offering. Another important point. The whole idea of how this works, is that a trick or it's for real? In other words, the Torah said that if she's really disloyal, something happened to her and die, or whatever, have her stomach turmoil. So the big question is that a real miracle that happened? Is that something that predestined? How it works? Think rationally. You take a jar, you put a water in a jar, and you take a piece of parchment, you write some letters, and you put it with the water and it's erased. Now you pull out the parchment and you let the person drink it. Is that kill a person? Not supposed to kill a person. It's like a little ink. What exactly happened that this water turn and kill or destroy the person from inside, the intestine? So Nachmanides is a different opinion. Nachmanides hold that none of the rule of the Torah has any form of miracle. He hold that the purpose of that is in order to clean the future generation from being a mamzer meaning illegitimate child, because if she pregnant with illegitimate child and he suspected her for having this child with illicit relation with another man, so drinking that water basically clean not so much the relationship between them, but the child and the future generation. So you see that the Torah is a living Torah, is a loving Torah, is a loving God that try to restore not only peace between the partners, but purify the name of the future generation as well. So, according to Nachmanides, is the whole idea that to purify the mamzerut, the illegitimate child, or suspicion of illegitimate child. Not everyone hold that. The Maimonides in the book Guide for the Perplexed, he explained it, and let me read some. I tried to translate it from his words. It's a Guide for the Perplexed, chapter 3. Those who wants to read it, sub chapter 49. He said this is a educational and psychological treatment idea, that not so much of real incidences that happen to people and the consequences of those incidences, but the Torah put it in writing so people should feel more responsible before they're thinking of doing such a thing. People should realize what's happened and how self-destructive this type of thing can be, not only to the family or to them, but the future generation as well. He emphasized the point that sometimes, potentially, there are women or people, men, that rather die than suffer from this tremendous embarrassment. Because he described it, imagine, he said, that you have all this tremendous amount of public knowledge, because you can't keep that secret, right? They go to the temple and they gather together and everybody stick their nose to see what's happening, right? And the media is around, right? In our language. And they see all this ritual and she's drinking and all of that. That's a tremendous amount of embarrassment. So either you say that it's like miracle happened, that something happened, or you can go by the Maimonides, who said that it's not so much act of miracle, it's just the psychological part, which is just by thinking of what's happened to me if I drink it, etc., etc., and that created a self-destruction within the person's mind, because just the images of how things affect, it's already destructive to a person. So it's not so much that they put some medication in there and created some drugs or something in our language. is just, Maimonides is more logical in that sense. He says the psychological element that involved with that, for individual and for society, hopefully prevents the distress. So, with that in mind, we go back to the concept in the Parsha. What's the basically what we learn from this part? So we learn from this part that this is an ancient biblical time. They have this type of way to check. But we are now living in a society, it's sad comment, but a society that more and more people just live together without being married for all kind of reasons. One of the key problems that many people suffer is the rather being in the unhappy marriage or separated rather than to go to the sorrow of divorce and the consequences on the future generation and the financial burden and the lawyers and everything else. I can't tell you how many times I heard from people they live in a miserable marriage but they're not ready to do anything because either they cannot afford or because the fear of the consequences between their children, their job, or all kind of things that people are afraid. So we basically, because many people don't live by the way of Torah, unfortunately, we are facing a society, especially in the Western world, and I'm not criticizing the world, it's just the reality. We're living in a society with the explosion of the all these trash television programs and all the trash internet. We are reaching the point in society that it's so, on one hand is so open, quote unquote, society, that young people less and less getting married, not only in the Jewish faith, but in general, they less and less getting married, and basically it's in many ways not the way that God created the world for. So the whole concept of the ancient Sotah was to build a premises of good relationship and good family. So we should not look at this story as, look, you always hear from people who said, but look at this, the Torah or the Rabbi is always for the man and always against women, all kind of incorrect statements. The truth of the matter, the Torah is for everyone. And because the Torah care and God care for everyone, therefore they have all these rules. I just mentioned some of them: the prohibition against locking the door, the prohibition against beating up spouse, the prohibition against treating poorly a spouse. It's all part of what living Torah is all about. That's domestic violence in the Jewish law. But in order to restore peace in our faith, we go so far that God said clearly in the Torah that I am ready and willing to even go to that stage of erasing my holy of holy names in order to clarify the future generation and clarify the relationship between the two. So sometimes people think twice before they doing anything or before they pursuing anything. But the goal is to create a healthy family and healthy society. And that's the purpose of the Torah. So what we learned, to wrap up everything, we learned today just two points from the Parsha. It's a rich Parsha and there's much more to discuss. We're running out of time. We can discuss the Nazirite, which Judaism very much basically opposed Nazirites. There's a counting of the tribes. There's another subject we didn't reach today. But we discussed a little bit the priest, the blessing of the priest and the Kohanim. And discuss the idea of Sotah, the unfaithful relationship and the consequences. And as we say many times, the Torah is a living Torah. The Torah is the Torah that applies to our lives. And I bless and hope that this important word of the Torah we should take to our heart in order to build a better world. Thank you very much.